After the poor reception of 2002's Halloween Resurrection, the producers were trying to figure out the next best step for the franchise. After considering a crossover with Hellraiser in the vein of Freddy vs. Jason that was dropped due to poor audience polls, they eventually landed on rebooting the franchise with Rob Zombie taking the reins as director, releasing his take in 2007. The film and its 2009 sequel pushed Michael Myers and the world around him into a much grimier world and tried to give us a glimpse into the mind of the killer, for better or worse. These films are not looked on too fondly to this day, even by Halloween sequel standards, but I am curious to look back and see if Rob Zombie's remakes are really that bad, or if they might be some diamond in the rough. Let's do this. So like I said up top, it took a while before settling on doing a reboot of Halloween. Producer Mustafa Akkad spent a lot of time on the Hellraiser crossover, as well as a script called Bad Blood that would have brought back Jamie Lloyd, one in the Smiths Grove Sanitarium that would have taken place during and canonized Season of the Witch, and Halloween Retribution, where surviving characters from H20 were seeking revenge on Michael for killing Laurie. That's a lot of scripts that were at least partially written. It wasn't until Mustafa died and his son Malik took over, as well as the Weinstein Company coming on board, that the decision to do a full-on reboot was made. Rob Zombie was brought on to spearhead the project after the success of his first two films as part of a 3-picture deal. When he got the offer, Zombie went to Carpenter out of respect, and Carpenter told him, "Go for it, Rob. Make it your own." And no matter what you say about the Halloween movies, Zombie did make them his own. House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects are hardcore, dark comedy grindhouse flicks that are not really major crowd pleasers. Exploitation movies like these, or the ones that inspired them, are very mean-spirited, violent, and can be really upsetting. Hence why Zombie's first pictures have mixed reviews. They still made plenty of money for their size and have such loyal fans. Personally, I prefer Corpses. The single contained location has such a great gonzo design. The whole thing is perfectly contained insanity. Rejects trades a lot of that for a sprawling, neo-western edge that feels like it gets away from itself and feels much more relentlessly nasty, and that's not my thing. So with all that, we have a template for what Zombie was bringing to the table with Halloween, and at times, I think that it really works. A lot of people have criticized his Myers being a hulking brutalizer played by Tyler Mane, and I understand why. The Carpenter films use regular-sized guys to play him, and that plays into the feeling that this could be anybody putting on a mask and killing people, but that is not what the 2007 remake is trying to be. In making a film that goes for the extremes like this, you have to build up your killer in some way. On top of that, the slasher boom that followed the original Halloween made Michael Myers feel less special in their wake. You can see attempts to make Myers into something more in all of the sequels before this. Halloween 2 making him Laurie's brother to add depth, the Thorn movies adding the mystery of his sci-fantasy resurrection, and then the revenge plot of 20 years later. It has always been pretty obvious that Michael needed more going on for him beyond the first picture. All that to say is I get why Zombie made the change, and is one I do think works for a reimagining, especially with the tone he is going for. That said, not all of the changes work for me like this does. The big issue is in the story. Zombie wanted to try to get into the head of his killer, understanding why he is the way he is, instead of letting him be the unknowable killing machine. The movie is about Michael Myers, and not the shape, if that makes sense. In an interview before the release, when asked if the film would tackle Michael's childhood at all, Rob Zombie said, "I think this aspect of the story is very important in order to bring new life to the character." So because of that take, we get a version of the film where the first act or so is dedicated to Michael's childhood, his trauma, and what led him to becoming the violent killer. Lots of build-up to this version of the iconic Halloween opening, and time spent in the aftermath. After that prequel, you get the reimagining of the first film with all this new context. It takes away from the mystery, but adds a layer of tragedy to the whole thing. Also, as a quick aside, the kid who played young Michael looked a whole lot like the younger brother of one of my friends from high school at the time, And to this day, I can't help but giggle at the thought of him playing the role. Editing this is going to be so fun for me. This big structural change feels like the kind of thing I think works for me on paper more than in execution. A part of that comes from the fact that the reimagined section has put characters like Laurie through the Rob Zombie filter, making them drastically different characters. If the characters had stuck more closely to the original, with the audience having the original as shorthand, it might have worked better. To restate my point on trading mystery for tragedy, if they had done a version that traded Carpenter's signature suspense for zombies' gore, with all that backstory added up front, I can see it landing better because we still have the same theme at its core of evil invading a small town, just in a drastically different way for a very different time of release. I also think that keeping closer to the original, albeit slimmed down, would make up for the fact that Rob Zombie's biggest weakness is writing characters. His films all take place in a crapsack world where everyone is bad and often obnoxious. Characters in his work become compelling not because of how he writes them, but because of the aura his actors are bringing to them. I also think the 2007 movie runs a bit long, so I think a speedrun take on Carpenter's version would have helped with that, while still making room for the prelude and what Zombie does best, the violence. His movies are not subtle in any ways, but they all do a great job when it comes to the gory, brutal violence. It's why so many people over the years say he should have done a remake of something like Texas Chainsaw, or even like The Hills Have Eyes, some other grindhouse movie that fits into his repertoire more easily. Those elements he adds are the best parts of his Halloween. That shit hits hard. I, for one, don't think he was a bad choice for this remake, because if you want to do a remake, you should try to do something new with it. That's why those 80s remakes like The Fly and The Thing work, because they were made by filmmakers putting their stamp on the original material. While someone trying to do an imitation of Carpenter may have made a better, more palatable Halloween film, I doubt they would have made one as memorable as this. Honestly, I think Rob just needed a co-writer, someone who could balance out some of his weak points while still letting him do what he does best. Someone with mutual respect who understands what he's doing, not someone trying to puppet him like the producers, who we will get to shortly. The 2000 film is rough. It refuses to let any of its characters, especially Laurie and Loomis, be relatable to the average audience member, but it still has plenty going for it. So while it lacks the ambiguity that we all love so much, I think it is still a diamond in the rough, a phrase I think I actually use in the intro. But I do think that the best part about it is how it leads to a much better sequel. Halloween 2 rips. While it still has some of the character issues that plagues the first one, and Zombie's work as a whole, there is so much more to enjoy here. No longer tied down to remaking someone else's work, he's able to build on his own themes as he explores the aftermath of such a violent, traumatizing event. I'm really glad we got this because Rob initially didn't want to make it. This all comes down to working with the Weinsteins. Aside from all the terrible treatment of women over the years, Harvey and his brother Bob were well known to be very controlling as producers. They helped great filmmakers produce hit films, and they thought they were the ones who made it happen almost all on their own from the sounds of it.
I think the basic mindset they had was every director and every actor is an idiot, and the movie can only be good if we save it because everyone in this town is stupid but us.
Rob Zombie felt this way during post-production on Halloween, where they insisted on hiring a different editor than his.
When Bob watched the movie, when it was done, this is how he calls me and goes, I hate every single fucking frame of this movie. You have to fire your editor. He's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know what he's fucking doing. I hate everything. So we had this other editor who had been an Academy Award nominated editor, but I didn't need him. So I put him in another room and he just sort of hung out. And then the morning, the day the movie came out, Bob calls me at 10 a.m. He goes, it doesn't look good. This thing's a fucking disaster. And then he calls me like a couple hours later. We're adding more screenings. This thing's going through the roof.
But once Halloween was a financial hit, they changed their tune and wanted him to do the sequel right away. Rob Zombie only agreed to do it in exchange for being let out of his contract without having to deliver them a third film. That's how bad they are to work with. I am glad he did this though, because Halloween 2 is so much more my speed. It leans into the expressionistic stuff that I loved from House of a Thousand Corpses, essentially making the two Halloween films an inverse of his first two films in that progression of tone. There is a dark beauty to so many parts of this film that I just adore. It helps build on the broken mental state of not only Michael, but Laurie after the events of the first film. The non-literal approach to those themes of lost innocence may not work for everyone, but I really appreciate it here. I even think Laurie and Loomis as characters work better in this one. Laurie's arc is so tragically compelling, and I think it would even work if the first one had mild alterations done to it. Changes or not, I think it works really well. Not only for her character arc on her own, but it also helps unify Laurie and Michael as siblings, an element that is baked into the reboots instead of the more tacked on way the originals did it. Now don't get me wrong, there is still some unpleasantness and honestly borderline cringe moments, but I do think that it is more palatable here, for me at least, than it was in the first. Loomis also works so much better. He was a less caring, more jaded character in the first, and that made him less compelling. The character works better in the sequel, where he has flipped his work with Michael into a lucrative book and fame, pushing him into higher levels of assholery. All in all, I feel like this whole remake experiment is worth it for how gonzo Halloween 2 is. On top of that, it catches the viewer up well enough on the first film that this might even work as a standalone. I can't say that for certain because I have seen them in order. If you are watching this video and haven't seen these films, maybe just go watch the second one and then come back here to let me know. And maybe leave a like. And don't forget to ring the bell. I do think these movies are flawed, but fun. I totally get why plenty of people don't like them. I'm not going to act like they're wrong for feeling that way, but especially in the case of the second one, I do think that there is some really good stuff in there. Honestly, I also think you can feel their influence on the David Gordon Green trilogy, with Michael feeling more brutal in a similar way to the Rob Zombie version, and the commentary on true crime in the 2008 film with the podcasters feels like an echo of Loomis in the sequel here, and that's something I think is really interesting. No Halloween movie ever lives up to the Carpenter original, even the sequel he worked on, but I do appreciate the huge swings this one took, and is worth a revisit if you haven't in a while. Thank you so much for watching another Halloween video in the Halloween season. I've done a few of these now, and I think this one and the last one, honestly, are really good, so if you haven't seen that one, check it out, subscribe if you're not, and until next time, have a good one.